Hi, this is Ramya Ravindran and welcome back to my channel Infinity for UPSC. A closer look at the administration and consolidation under Khiljis and Tughlaqs. So here we are going to study about Khiljis and Tughlaqs in detail. So let us have a look at the dates of Khiljis and Tughlaqs. The Khilji dynasty, it ruled from 1290 to 1320. That is just for 30 years. So 1290 to 1320. So the dates are easy to remember. It is from 13th century to 14th century, but they could rule only for 30 years. But the dates are on the border, 1290 to 1320. Then here also in the dates we have got two different centuries, but they could actually rule for 100 years, that is 1 century, from 1320 to 1414. That means almost 100 years. And the dates are also easy to remember. 1320 it got ended, and here from 1320 onwards till 1414. So 1414 it is a easy number to remember. The consolidation of a kingdom as vast as the Delhi Sultanate needed reliable governors and administrators. We had seen that from the time of Iltutmish onwards, they had started capturing cities outside of Delhi. And by the time of Khiljis and Tughlaqs, we had seen that they had controlled vast amount of area, including South India. And the conquest to South started from Alauddin Khilji and ended with Tughlaqs. So that means they have moved from a small garrison town and they have went on to build a big empire. So these Khiljis and Tughlaqs, they were taking care of a big empire, and to consolidate that big empire, to take care of that big empire, they needed reliable governors and administrators. Now this is very interesting because the rulers of Delhi Sultanate, they believed more in their slaves, more than believing their own family members or their own sons. So that is the case of Delhi Sultanate, the rulers of Delhi Sultanate, and this tradition started with Iltutmish. So let us see where is Iltutmish. So he is from the slave dynasty and he ruled from 1210 to 1236. So almost 26 years. Now this date is easy. I have repeated this date several times. Turkish rulers, they ruled from 1206 to 1290. So it is 12 here and 12 here, but they ruled for almost 100 years, 1206 to 1290, from the beginning of 13th century to the end of 13th century. And Iltutmish, he ruled from 1210 to 1236, 26 years. He could rule for 26 years. So this becomes easy to remember. 1210, it is a round figure. He ruled for 26 years and here it is 36. So remember this 6, 26, 36. Rather than appointing aristocrats and landed chieftains as governors, the early Delhi sultans, especially Iltutmish, favored their special slaves purchased for military service called Bandagan in Persian. We had seen that the language of administration was Persian language. So in Persian it is called Bandaga. So you need to remember this, the language of administration was Persian. And Bandaga, this means special slaves. Then these slaves were carefully trained to man some of the most important political offices in the kingdom. That means huge responsibilities were given to these slaves and they were occupying important offices like the office of governor. Since they were totally dependent upon their master, that is, since these slaves were totally dependent upon their master, the Sultan could trust and rely upon them. Now these Delhi rulers, they felt that since these slaves are purchased, they do not have any family support, they do not have economic support, and they do not have any support of any sort. And that is the reason they felt that these slaves are totally dependent upon them and there is very little or zero chance of betraying the ruler. That means these people will not betray the ruler or they will not try to occupy the throne like we had seen in the earlier chapters. We had seen that governors were always waiting for an opportunity so that they could occupy the throne of the ruler. But here that will not take place. That was the belief of these Delhi sultans. The Khiljis and Tughlaqs continued to use Bandagan and they also raised people of humble birth to high political position. Now these slaves, they are purchased. That means they do not have a family now. But in case of Khiljis and Tughlaqs, apart from using slaves, they also raised people of humble birth to high political position. That means these people have got a family, but they were born into a very ordinary family. They were not part of noble families, and usually the noble people or the noble families, they used to occupy high political position. But that was not the case here. Khiljis and Tughlaqs, they were giving these important positions to people born in simple families. and these people were appointed as generals and governors. So similar to what Iltutmish was doing, these Khiljis and Tughlaqs, they were also making these people generals and governors. However, this also introduced an element of political instability. Now we will see in the further slide what was the reason behind this political instability. Now here in this slide we need to remember that Iltutmish from the slave dynasty and Khiljis and Tughlaqs, these people were giving important positions to slaves. And Khiljis and Tughlaqs, apart from giving important position to slaves, they were also giving those positions to people belonging to simple family and who were not part of noble families. Next, reason for political instability. Now what was the reason? Slaves and clients were loyal to their masters and patrons. Now who are patrons? Those rulers or those people belonging to high position who are supporting these slaves or these people from humble families. They are called patrons. So these slaves, they were loyal to their masters but not to their heirs. Heirs in the sense, the next generation. That is, it could be the sons of that ruler or it could be the next person who is going to occupy the throne. So that is the meaning of heir. So these slaves, they were loyal to their masters only but not to their children or not to the next generation. So now what is the case? We have got different slaves for different heirs, or we can say different slaves for different children or the contenders of the throne. So now suppose there are 3 children A, B and C and each of them have got their own slaves. So each of their slaves, they would want their own master to become the next king. Why? Because then they would become the slave of the king and not the slave of just a heir. So that means there was competition among the slaves themselves and they were trying to compete with each other to make their own master the ruler. So this was the reason for political instability. New sultans had their own servants. As a result, the accession of a new monarch often saw conflict between the old and the new nobility. Old and the new nobility in the sense, the previous ruler would have a slave and the new heirs, they will also have slaves. So there was competition between the old slaves and these new slaves because all of them wanted their own master to become the ruler. The patronage of these humble people by Delhi sultans also shocked many elites, and the authors of Persian Tawarikh criticized the Delhi sultans for appointing the low and base born to high offices. So who are the authors of Persian Tawarikhs? We had seen that Tawarikh means history and these are history writers. And what was the role of these history writers? We had already seen that the authors of Tawarikhs, apart from writing history, they used to advise the rulers. And they also emphasized on the importance of justice. They wanted to make sure that the ruler gives importance to justice and there is just rule within the administration. And apart from that, we also saw that these Tawarikhs made sure that ideal social order was preserved. Now what was this ideal social order? Social order based on birthright and based on gender distinction. So that means these authors of Tawarikhs, they cannot accept the fact that the people who are born in ordinary family, they occupy these high offices. So these people, they were not supporting this decision of the ruler. But still Delhi sultans followed this custom. The sultans were advised that it needs a whole lifetime and good luck to find a worthy and experienced slave. That means a good slave is that rare. Wise men have said that a worthy and experienced slave is better than a son. So these sultans, they believed that these slaves are better than the son. And that is the reason they gave the position of governor to a slave rather than giving it to the son. We had seen in ancient history that the position of the governor was always given to the son or to some or the other family member. But here we see that important positions are given to slaves and not to sons. Because somebody advised these sultans that slaves are more loyal than the sons. Now who advised this? We do not know because the authors of Tawarikhs, they are the ones who are advising the rulers and they did not believe in this custom. But the reason behind this custom could be the background of the ruler himself. We had seen that Iltutmish started this and he was the one who favored this custom. And Iltutmish was basically a slave. He belonged to the slave dynasty and maybe that is the reason he believed or he trusted slaves more than trusting his own family members, because he himself was a slave to another ruler and that is the reason he became a ruler, because his ruler trusted a slave rather than trusting his own son. And that is the reason Iltutmish, who was just a slave, he became a ruler, and now he is also doing the same thing. He is also trusting his own slave. That is, Iltutmish is also trusting his own slave rather than trusting his sons. Officials of Sultan Muhammad Tughlaq. Now we had seen that it was not just Iltutmish, but the Khiljis and Tughlaqs, they also supported this custom of favoring slaves, and they also gave important position to slaves. Now here they are mentioning who all were given important positions by Sultan Muhammad Tughlaq. So he appointed a wine distiller, Aziz Kumar, Firoz Haja, who was just a barber, Manka Tabak, a cook, the two gardeners, Ladda and Pira, to high administrative posts. That means all these people were given important positions like governor and important administrative positions. Now looking at this scenario, Ziauddin Barni, a mid-14th century chronicler, he reported that these appointments are a sign of Sultan's loss of political judgment and his incapacity to rule. That means Ziauddin Barni, he could not accept this fact that Sultan Muhammad Tughlaq is giving important positions to these people. So he was not in favor of this decision taken by Tughlaq. Now the another point that you need to note here is Ziauddin Barni was the contemporary of Muhammad Tughlaq. So they both belong to the same time period, and Ziauddin Barni had witnessed this event. So Muhammad Tughlaq and Ziauddin Barni, they are contemporaries of each other, and they belong to mid-14th century. So let's look at the time period of Muhammad Tughlaq, mid-14th century in the sense 1324 to 1351. So he also ruled for approximately 26 years. We had seen that Iltutmish, he had ruled for 26 years, and this is also almost 26 years. It is 27 years. So 24 to 51. And there is another way by which I remember this date. Muhammad Tughlaq, he has been called a mad ruler. That is, he has been criticized for most of the decisions that he had taken. He was known for his intellectual incapacity. So a mad ruler, someone who is imperfect. Now it starts from 1324 to 1351. So everything about this person is not perfect. So it is not 25 to 50, it is slightly lesser than 25 and slightly more than 50. So 24 to 51 because he is a mad ruler. And here it is 26 years, but he will not follow the same pattern as others. He will follow a different pattern. So slightly more than 26 years. He ruled for 27 years. So Muhammad Tughlaq, mid-14th century, 1324 to 1351. So like this, we'll try to remember some of the important dates given in the table, and we'll do that by the end of this chapter. Like the earlier sultans, the Khilji and Tughlaq monarchs appointed military commanders as governors of territories of varying sizes. That means each governor was given a territory of different size. These lands were called Ikta, and their holder was called Iktedar or Mukti. Now this term is easy, Iktedar. The holder of Ikta is called Iktedar. But Mukti is little bit confusing. So remember this, Mukti is the holder of Ikta. So Ikta, Mukti. Remember these two terms. Now we had seen something like this in the previous chapters. What was that? We had seen terms like Ur, Nad and Nagaram. Try to recollect the meaning of these terms. What was Ur? Ur was the place where peasants lived, non-Brahman peasants lived. And Nad, group of Urs become Nad. Then Nagaram, Nagaram basically means city or town where merchants live. So that was Ur, Nad and Nagaram. And Ur, Nad and Nagaram, these were seen in the southern kingdoms. Now here we get to see a new term Ikta, and this is from the beginning of 12th century onwards. And Ikta, this is a piece of land, Iktedar or Mukti, the holder of that land. The duty of Muktis was to lead military campaigns and maintain law and order in their Iktas. Now these Muktis are basically governors. Do not get confused that these people are just holder of the land. These people are governors, and they have been given a land, and that is the reason they are known as Muktis. But they are basically governors. So they will do everything that a governor is supposed to do, like military campaign and maintaining law and order. In exchange for their military services, the Muktis collected the revenues of their assignments as salary. I have told you that these people are into military campaigns as well. So in return, instead of getting salary, they can collect revenue from the land which has been given to them. So like every governor, even these people are collecting revenue, that is the entire revenue will go to them and they can lead military campaigns and maintain law and order. So all these are the duties of muktis. So remember everything: collecting revenue, military campaign, maintaining law and order. These muktis or these governors, they also paid their soldiers from these revenues. So whatever revenue they are getting, from that revenue they will have to pay salaries to these soldiers. Control over muktis was most effective if their office was not inheritable and if they were assigned iktas for a short period of time before being shifted. So this means they are given a particular ikta for some time period and after some time they are shifted and they are given some other ikta. That means they will have to relocate and they will have to take care of another ikta. And the position is inheritable. That means the position will not go to their children. Now this is different from what we have been seeing till now. We had seen that from the later phase of ancient history, most of the positions were heritable. That is, those were hereditary and it went on to their children. And even in the previous chapter where we had dealt from 7th to 12th century, there also we had seen that the position was hereditary. The position of collecting revenue, the positions in army, all these were hereditary and all these were given to close relatives of the king, to their sons or to their relatives. So from 12th century onwards, we see a drastic difference. We see the positions are not hereditary and the sons and the family members are not that important and slaves have become much more important. So a drastic change from 12th century onwards. These harsh conditions of service were rigorously imposed during the reigns of Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq. We'll note that among the Delhi Sultans, these two sultans are very important. So Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq, they were very strict when it comes to dealing with these governors and the conditions of service were very harsh. Then further, accountants were appointed by the state to check the amount of revenue collected by the muktis. So they want to make sure that they are not collecting tax more than what is prescribed by the state. So they are making sure that there is no corruption in the state. And this was done by Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq. So these slaves or these governors and muktis, they were very much under the control of the state or under the control of the ruler. So rulers were cross-checking everything that these governors were doing. And these rulers also made sure that these governors or muktis, they do not overthrow the ruler. And that is the reason they make sure that the position is not very powerful, and that's why these harsh conditions of service. So here we see governors, iktedar or mukti, all are one and the same, and these were given to slaves. Then the duties of these muktis are leading military campaign, maintaining law and order, collecting revenue, and they also supposed to pay their soldiers. And the conditions of service were very harsh. The office was not inheritable and their ikta was shifted. Then there were accountants who were cross-checking the amount of revenue which was collected. Care was taken that the mukti collected only the taxes prescribed by the state and that he kept the required number of soldiers. Now these muktis, if they are getting 100 rupees and they have to pay 50 rupees to soldiers, that is 1 rupee to each of the soldier, then in such a case, some of the muktis might think that instead of keeping 50 soldiers, why not keep just 10 soldiers? So I just have to pay 10 rupees and I will have balance 90 rupees. But that was also cross-checked by the state that they kept the required number of soldiers. Because if the muktis do not keep the required number of soldiers, whenever there is war, the sultans would be at loss. And that is the reason they make sure that the required number of soldiers are kept by the muktis. As the Delhi Sultans brought the hinterland of the cities under their control, they forced the landed chieftains, that is the Samanta aristocrats and rich landlords, to accept their authority. Now who are these Samantas? We had seen it in the previous chapter. We had seen that Samantas, they were basically big landlords or warrior chiefs and they were subordinate to the king. But these Samantas, they had military support and the ruler used to share power and wealth with these Samantas. So as time went by, when they became more powerful, they asserted their independence and they overthrew their lord. Then we had seen one example where Rashtrakutas of Deccan, they had overthrown the Chalukyas of Karnataka. And it was Dandi Durga, a Rashtrakuta chief, who overthrew his Chalukya overlord. So Rashtrakutas were basically Samantas who became rulers later on. So these Delhi Sultans, they made sure that these Samantas who were taking care of small pieces of land, they also accept their authority. Then under Alauddin Khilji, the state brought the assessment and collection of land revenue under its own control. So Alauddin Khilji, you need to associate with assessment and collection of land revenue. So all these were brought under the direct control of the ruler, Alauddin Khilji. So very important statement. The rights of the local chieftains to tax the people were cancelled and they were also forced to pay taxes. That is, people like these Samantas who were initially collecting the tax, and these people, they were not paying anything to the ruler. But now people like these Samantas and the other local chieftains, they have to pay taxes and now they cannot collect taxes. So everything has come under the direct control of the state. So all this was done by Alauddin Khilji. He was the person behind the assessment and collection of land revenue. That is, he was the person who was assessing each piece of land, that is how much revenue can be collected from this land, how productive is this land, and based on that the tax was fixed and revenue was collected. So now these local chieftains or Samantas, they cannot collect tax and instead they are supposed to pay tax. The Sultan's administrators measured the land and kept careful accounts. Some of the old chieftains and landlords served the Sultanate as revenue collectors and assessors. I have told you these Samantas, now they cannot collect tax, but now they have become the employee of the ruler and they are acting as revenue collectors and assessors. But they are just collecting the revenue, they cannot keep it with them, they will have to give it to the state. So they are merely collecting the revenue and assessing and giving it to the Sultan. So now this has become the new role of the Samantas and the local chieftains. There were three types of taxes. One was on cultivation called Kharaj, which was 50% of the peasants' produce. This is very high, 50% of peasants' produce, and this is called Kharaj. Very important term. Kharaj, it is basically a tax on cultivation and it is 50% of the peasants' produce. Second, on cattle, and third, on houses. Now when we were studying Cholas, we had seen that there were almost 400 types of taxes. And we had also seen that Vetti was the most frequently mentioned tax, which was not collected in cash but in the form of service. So you're always supposed to go back to the chapters and revise the associated terms. So there it was Vetti, and now we are seeing Kharaj, which is on cultivation, 50% of peasants' produce. So here what have we seen? Basically, we have seen that the role of Samantas have changed totally and there are three types of taxes: Kharaj, on cattle and on houses. And the most important statement here is Alauddin Khilji. He was the person who brought the assessment and collection of land revenue under the control of the state. Then it is important to remember that large parts of the subcontinent remained outside the control of the Delhi Sultans. We had seen that Iltutmish onwards, they had started capturing places which were outside of Delhi, and this was the empire which was built by Iltutmish in the 13th century. Look at the time period from 1210 to 1236, that is initial period of 13th century, and he had ruled for 26 years. You need to revise everything. Then we saw that Alauddin Khilji, he was the first person to annex regions in South India. And this campaign into South India continued till the time of Muhammad Tughlaq. So starting from Alauddin Khilji to Muhammad Tughlaq, they were campaigning into South India. But now what has happened? Now they have realized that it was difficult to control distant provinces like Bengal from Delhi, and soon after annexing southern India, the entire region became independent. That is, they could not hold on to the southern part of India for a long time. It became independent immediately after it was annexed. So that is the reason they realized that it is very difficult to control distant provinces, and that's why they thought of not controlling the distant provinces later on. Then they also realized that it was not just the distant provinces like Bengal and southern India which was getting difficult. Even the places in Gangetic Plain, those were forested areas, and even these areas were difficult to control because the Sultanate forces could not penetrate into these forest areas. And in these forest areas, the local chieftains, they established their rule. we had seen that the rulers of the Sultanate, they had forced the Samantas and the other local chieftains to accept their authority. But that was not working in the case of Gangetic Plain, because in Gangetic Plain there were forested areas which were very difficult for the Sultanate to penetrate into, and that's why local chieftains were ruling that area. So the difficult areas for Khiljis and Tughlaqs were the distant provinces like Bengal and southern India, and the difficult regions like Gangetic Plain, which were forested areas. Then Ibn Battuta, who was a 14th century traveler from Morocco, Africa. So remember this, Ibn Battuta, he was from Morocco, Africa, and he belonged to 14th century. Now he has got something to say about those chieftains who lived within the forested areas. So what is it that he has to say? He explained that chieftains sometimes fortified themselves in mountains, in rocky, uneven and rugged places, as well as in bamboo groves. In India, the bamboo is not hollow. Now this might be some different variety of bamboo, but generally bamboos are hollow. These bamboos are big. Its several parts are so intertwined that even fire cannot affect them. Now intertwined in the sense they are very closely connected to each other. Now in that case, it is very difficult to penetrate the bamboo grooves, because it is very difficult to cut such intertwined bamboo grooves, and moreover it cannot catch fire. So you cannot cut it and you cannot bring it down to ashes by setting fire on it, because even fire cannot affect them. So as a whole, these bamboo grooves are very strong, and these bamboo grooves are acting as a boundary of these forests. So the rulers or the Delhi Sultanate could not penetrate these bamboo boundaries, and inside these bamboo boundaries, these chieftains lived. Then inside these forests, which are guarded by these bamboo boundaries, they have got their cattle, they have got their crops, and they have got water, because they are getting rainwater and they are collecting rainwater. So they do not have to come out for anything. Everything that they want is available within the forest: cattle, crops and water. Now we already know that Alauddin Khilji, he used to apply this tactic on his opponent. He used to station the troop outside the kingdom of some Rajput dynasty, and that Rajput kingdom would ultimately one day exhaust their resources and they will have to come out. So either they will die of hunger or they will have to fight the battle. But here that is not the case. These chieftains, they do not have to come out for anything. And this army, that is the army of the Delhi Sultanate, they cannot go inside. So there is no way that Delhi Sultanate can defeat these chieftains. They cannot be subdued. They, in the sense, these chieftains cannot be subdued except by powerful armies who, entering these forests, cut down these bamboos with specially prepared instruments. Sometimes rulers like Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq could force their control into these areas, but only for a short duration. So we had already seen that it is very difficult to penetrate into the Gangetic Plain, and Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq, they did so, but only for a short duration. So you need to associate Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq with this fact as well. Then next is the Mongol attack. The Mongols under Genghis Khan, you can also refer to this as Genghis Khan. So Genghis Khan, he invaded Transoxiana in northeast Iran in 1219, and the Delhi Sultanate faced their onslaught soon after. So that means around 1219, even Delhi Sultanate were attacked by Mongols. Now you need to see around 1219 who was ruling Delhi at that time. So around 1219 we have got Iltutmish. So it was during the Iltutmish time Mongols attacked Delhi for the first time. Then the Mongol attacks on the Delhi Sultanate increased during the reign of Alauddin Khilji and in the early years of Muhammad Tughlaq's rule. So that means it started from Iltutmish time onwards, and then it increased during the time of Alauddin Khilji and also during the initial years of Muhammad Tughlaq. So starting from 1219 onwards, it lasted up to 14th century or the initial phase of 14th century. This forced the two rulers to mobilize a large standing army in Delhi. What is the meaning of large standing army? Standing army in the sense permanent army. So permanent army was mobilized by Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq. and this posed a huge administrative challenge. And we will see how these two rulers dealt with the scenario and what is the difference between their style of dealing with the scenario. So once again we'll look at the timeline of Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq. Tughlaq, you should know it by this time. It is 1324 to 1351, mid 14th century, and since he is mad, nothing is perfect. It is 24 to 51 and little more than 26 years, that is 27 years. Then coming to Alauddin Khilji, it is 1296 to 1316. So end of 13th century to beginning of 14th century. So he ruled for almost 20 years. See, this 6 is common everywhere. Here Iltutmish ruled for 26 years. Here you have got 36. Then I have told you Tughlaq a little more than 26 years, that is 27 years. Then coming to Alauddin Khilji, you have got 6 everywhere, 1296 to 1316. But it is not 26 years, he ruled for 20 years, 96 to 16. So if you remember this 26 and 6, it becomes easy for you. So Alauddin Khilji 1296 to 1316. Then Tughlaq 1324 to 1351. So difference between Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq. During Alauddin Khilji's time, Delhi was attacked twice, in 1300 and in 1302. As a defensive measure, Alauddin Khilji raised a large standing army. So he adopted a defensive measure. That means he will not attack, he will only defend the attack of the opponent. Then coming to Muhammad Tughlaq, the Sultanate was attacked in the early years of Muhammad Tughlaq's reign. The Mongol army was defeated. That means he could defeat the Mongol army. But Muhammad Tughlaq was confident about the strength of his army and his resources. So he planned an attack on Transoxiana. We had seen that Mongols had attacked Transoxiana and they were in Transoxiana. So he had decided to attack Transoxiana. He therefore raised a large standing army. So that means not just defeating the Mongol army, he also thought of attacking them by going to Transoxiana. And that is the reason he had raised a large standing army. Now all these are expenses. You need to know that everything is expense for the administration and this is going to cost the administration. Alauddin constructed a new garrison town named Siri for his soldiers. I have told you garrison town means a town where troops are stationed. So he created a new city. Now you need to remember where Siri is. I have already told you this is Old Delhi, Jahanpana and Siri. You need to remember this order. These kind of questions are frequently asked. Old Delhi, Jahanpana and Siri. Siri, this was a new city created by Alauddin Khilji as a garrison town when the Mongol army was about to attack. So you need to associate Siri with Alauddin Khilji and Mongol attack. Then when it comes to Muhammad Tughlaq, rather than constructing a new garrison town, the oldest of the 4 cities of Delhi, that is the Old Delhi, it was emptied of its residents and the soldiers garrisoned there. That means all the residents of Old Delhi, they were forced out of Old Delhi and soldiers occupied that region. So the residents of Old Delhi, they were sent to new capital of Daulatabad in the south. Now this Daulatabad, it is in the Deccan region. So you can assume the distance. This is Delhi in the north and this is in the south in the Deccan region. So they had to travel from Delhi to Daulatabad with all the belongings and the children and the old ones. So it was a very chaotic situation for the ordinary residents of Old Delhi. Then when it comes to feeding the army, in case of Alauddin Khilji, it was done through the produce collected as tax from the land between Ganga and Yamuna. We know that this is the most productive land and hence tax was raised from Ganga Yamuna region and the tax was fixed at 50% of the peasant's yield. We know that kharaj is 50% of the peasant's produce. So tax was fixed as usual, that is at 50%, and it was not raised because of war. So there was no difficulty to the ordinary people here and no difficulty to the peasants in case of feeding the army. But when it comes to Muhammad Tughlaq, the produce from the same area was collected as tax to feed the army. Same area in the sense Ganga Yamuna region. But to meet the expense of maintaining such a large number of soldiers, additional taxes were charged. And this coincided with famine in the area. That means the productivity was already low because of the famine in the region. And in addition to that, Muhammad Tughlaq, he has imposed additional taxes. So we saw that in this case the peasants were not overloaded with tax, but here the peasants were overloaded with tax, that is additional tax, and the condition was further aggravated because of the famine. That means the peasants were in distress because of Muhammad Tughlaq. And here we saw that the ordinary people were in distress because of the decision taken by Muhammad Tughlaq. Then the soldiers had to be paid, and Alauddin chose to pay his soldiers salaries in cash rather than in iktas. We had seen that they were giving a piece of land called iktas, and those muktis, they had 3 duties to do, and they were also maintaining their own army. But now these soldiers, they are not given iktas, instead they are given cash. The soldiers would buy their supplies from merchants in Delhi, and it was thus feared that the merchants would raise their prices. To stop this, Alauddin controlled the prices of goods in Delhi. Prices were carefully surveyed by officers, and merchants who did not sell at the prescribed rate, they were punished. So this is what Alauddin Khilji did. He made sure that the soldiers have got cash with them, because collecting revenue and maintaining iktas was a difficult task, so he gave them cash. And he also wanted to make sure that with that cash these soldiers can buy whatever they want to. So if that should happen, the things in the market should be available in a standard rate. So he made sure that the merchants do not raise the price, and he also employed people to check whether these merchants are selling at the prescribed rate or not. So this is what Alauddin Khilji did. Now coming to Muhammad Tughlaq, he also paid his soldiers in cash, but instead of controlling prices, he used a token currency. Now this token currency, this is somewhat similar to the present day paper currency. But the difference is that this is made of cheap metal. Earlier they were using gold and silver coins, but these gold and silver coins were replaced with cheap metals like copper. And people in 14th century, they did not trust these coins. They were very smart. They saved their gold and silver coins and paid all their taxes to the state with this token currency. That means in the market they had all cheap metals, and gold and silver were stocked in the houses of these people. This cheap currency could also be counterfeited easily. Now another interesting fact is that when Muhammad Tughlaq issued this cheap metal, the people, they counterfeited that token currency. They were having all utensils made of copper, and they converted those utensils into token currency made of copper. So now we have got counterfeit currency, and they were paying taxes and buying things using these counterfeited currencies. Now what will happen? When you have got too much money with the people, they will stock up all the things from the market into their home. So now market will have less of objects to sell. So what will these sellers do? They will raise the prices of the objects which are left. So now what will happen? Now this will lead to inflation, and ultimately that will lead to hyperinflation. So what is the result? So when there is inflation and hyperinflation, if you want to buy 1 kg of rice, you will have to pay 10,000 rupees or 1 lakh rupees. So that is the meaning of inflation and hyperinflation. This will happen when too much money is there with the people, and when they keep on buying things from the market. And that is what happened in the case of Muhammad Tughlaq. So ultimately he had to recall the token currency. Now when he tried to recall the token currency, these people again came up with the counterfeited currencies. That is, they came up with the copper currencies which were made from the utensils, because they had got lot of utensils with them, and again they tried to exchange with that counterfeited currency with gold and silver, because Muhammad Tughlaq said that I want to recall these token currencies which are made of cheap metals. So people are supposed to bring whatever token currency is left with them, and I will exchange that token currency with gold and silver, and once again we will have only gold and silver coins in the market and not of cheap metals. So these people, they came up with the counterfeited copper coins, and they wanted gold and silver coins in exchange of these counterfeited copper coins. So once again that resulted in chaos in the kingdom. So this was a scenario which took place because of Muhammad Tughlaq's token currency. Then Alauddin's administrative measures were quite successful, and chroniclers praised his reign for its cheap prices and efficient supplies of goods in the market. He successfully withstood the threat of Mongol invasions. So that means Alauddin Khilji dealt with the Mongol invasions or the threat of Mongol invasions quite successfully. Now when we come to Muhammad Tughlaq, his administrative measures were a failure because he had campaigned into Kashmir and this was a disaster. So his campaign into Kashmir, first failure. Then he had plans to invade Transoxiana and disbanded his large army. We had already discussed that instead of following defensive measure like Alauddin Khilji, he wanted to attack them. So if you want to attack them, you will have to raise additional army because you want one set of army to defend your kingdom and another set of army to attack somebody else. So that means you need extra soldiers and you need to raise a large army and feed this large army. So that is an extra expenditure. Then the shifting of people to Daulatabad was resented. We saw that Alauddin Khilji made a new garrison town called Siri. That was for the soldiers. But Muhammad Tughlaq did not establish a new town. Instead, he relocated the people who were living in Old Delhi and they made all these people travel up to Daulatabad. So that was his third failure. Then he had raised the taxes. We saw that Alauddin Khilji did not raise the tax. It was kept at 50%, which was the old rate of taxation. But here he had raised the tax. And there was already famine in the Ganga Yamuna belt. So that means this is extra burden on the peasants. The raising of taxes and famine in the same region. And all these led to widespread rebellion. That means all the people were unhappy because of the administrative measures of Muhammad Tughlaq. Then in this list of Muhammad Tughlaq's failure, we sometimes forget that for the first time in the history of Sultanate, a Delhi Sultan planned a campaign to capture Mongol territory. That's what we had seen earlier. Alauddin Khilji, he had followed a defensive measure. Whereas Muhammad Tughlaq, he had followed a offensive measure. That is, he was trying to attack the Mongol army and not just resist them. So the author is saying that Muhammad Tughlaq was the first person to do so in the Delhi Sultanate and we should appreciate him for that. Then the Sultanate in the 15th and 16th century. So after the Tughlaqs, we had the Sayyid and Lodi dynasties and these two dynasties ruled from Delhi and Agra until 1526. So the Lodi dynasty ended in 1526. So here we have got Sayyid dynasty from 1414 to 1451 and Lodi dynasty from 1451 to 1526. Now you are familiar with this date 1414. So here Sayyid dynasty started from 1414. And 1526, this is easy to remember because I have already told you that 26 is an important number and you should remember this number. So here we have got 26. And Lodi dynasty, this is an important dynasty because here we have got Sikandar Lodi. So like Khilji dynasty and Tughlaq dynasty, here Lodi dynasty is also spread across two different centuries. So 1451 to 1526. Now 1451, this should be easy to remember because here we have got 1526 and this 15 you just have to reverse it. So here you get 1451 and the same goes here. So 1414 to 1451 and 1451 to 1526. By then, Jaunpur, Bengal, Malwa, Gujarat, Rajasthan and the entire South India had independent rulers. And these rulers established flourishing states and prosperous capitals. We had seen that it was difficult for the Delhi rulers to capture distant lands like Bengal and South India. And as soon as they captured these places became independent. But apart from these places which are distant, the places like Jaunpur, Malwa, Gujarat and Rajasthan, all these places also became independent by the end of 16th century. And we know that in all these areas, that is Jaunpur, Malwa, Gujarat, Rajasthan, all these were controlled by Rajputs. So Rajputs, they re-emerged in these states and they started occupying the kingdom. This was also the period which saw the emergence of new ruling groups like Afghans and Rajputs. But we have already seen Rajputs ruling India. We had seen Tomars and we had seen Chauhans ruling Delhi. So we had seen that Rajputs were the first one to rule Delhi. But these Rajputs which are mentioned here, they are new ones. They are not related to Tomars or Chauhans and that is the reason they have said emergence of new ruling groups like Afghans and Rajputs. Some of the states established in this period were small but powerful and extremely well administered. So after Lodi dynasty, we have got one important dynasty, and that is Suri dynasty. And in the Suri dynasty, the most important ruler is Sher Shah Suri, and he ruled from 1540 to 1545. Now Sher Shah Sur and his time period is important because he is a ruler who had defeated Humayun. So Sher Shah Sur 1540 to 1545. And here we can see that Humayun, he could rule from 1530 to 1540 because after that he was defeated by Sher Shah Sur and he took over the kingdom. So 1540 onwards Sher Shah Sur ruled, but he could rule only for 5 years. And again Humayun comes into picture in 1555, but he could rule only for 1 year because by then he had died. So Sher Shah Sur, he started his career as the manager of a small territory for his uncle in Bihar and eventually challenged and defeated the Mughal Emperor Humayun. Sher Shah captured Delhi and established his own dynasty. Although Sur dynasty ruled for only 15 years, it introduced an administration that borrowed elements from Alauddin Khilji and made them more efficient. So Sur dynasty, they followed the same administration technique which was followed by Alauddin Khilji, and Sur dynasty made them more efficient. And later on, Sher Shah Sur's administration was so successful that the great Emperor Akbar, he also followed the model which was followed by Sher Shah Sur. So Sher Shah Sur's administration became the model followed by the great Emperor Akbar, and he ruled from 1556 to 1605. That is, after Humayun died, Akbar, who was the son of Humayun, he had to take over and he occupied the throne in 1556 and he ruled up to 1605. So till then he consolidated the Mughal Empire. So we had seen many dynasties, that is Rajput, Slave dynasty, Khilji, Tughlaq, Sayyid dynasty, Lodi dynasty, Sur dynasty, and after that the Mughals come into picture. And in the next chapter we are going to cover Mughals in detail. So this is the end of Delhi Sultanate. Now elsewhere. So while all these rulers were ruling Delhi in India, what was happening in Europe? So in Europe there was something called as three orders: Peace of God, Knights and the Crusaders. The idea of three orders was first formulated in France in the early 11th century. It divided society into three classes: those who prayed, those who fought, and those who tilled the land. Tilled the land in the sense peasants. So same like what we have in India, we have got four varnas where we have got Brahmins who pray, Kshatriyas who fight, and Vaishyas who till the land. So these people also divided their people into different groups: those who prayed, those who fought, and those who tilled the land. This division was supported by church to consolidate its dominant role in society. This helped the emergence of a new warrior group called Knights. So Knights are basically the people who fought for church and who fought for the religion. The church patronized this group and used them to propagate the idea of peace of God. The attempt was to direct warriors away from conflict among themselves and send them instead on a campaign against the Muslims who had captured the city of Jerusalem. So church wanted that these knights, they should not fight amongst themselves. Instead, they should fight against the Muslims who had captured the city of Jerusalem. So the knights, they were basically fighting for the religion and for the church. This led to a series of campaigns called the Crusades. So crusades are basically series of campaigns which were led by knights for peace of God. These campaigns completely altered the status of knights. Originally, these knights did not belong to the class of nobles. But by the end of 11th century in France and a century later in Germany, that is by the end of 12th century in Germany, the humble origins of these warriors were forgotten. And by 12th century, nobles also wanted to be known as knights. So what they are saying is, initially these knights, they did not come from noble families, but the status got elevated, and by the end of 12th century, even nobles wanted to be known as knights. So the chapter ends here, and I am not revising this chapter because while discussing this chapter, every single statement and every single slide was discussed thoroughly. So we do not need the revision part. So that's all from my side for this chapter. Please like, share and subscribe this channel, and I'll be back with the next video very soon. Thank you so much.